Well, as we recap the year, I'm going to share with you the worst items that I tested and reviewed for 2019. Well, folks, welcome back to another episode here at Gideonstactical. Thanks for joining me today. And if you're new to the channel, I'd invite you to subscribe and become part of the GT family. We're throwing up content like this every single week. And I get my hands on a lot of gear. And so every year, I have a list of things that I love, from fixed blades and pocket knives and gear to the worst list. So these are the items throughout the year that I've gotten my hands on, that I've tested, I've reviewed, that just did not connect with me, and I was really unimpressed with, because a lot of the time you're either like, yeah, it's decent, or whoa, that blew me away. But man, when it is something that you can't really recommend to people, it's a highlight for me, and I gotta do this highlight reel with you. So let's go ahead and get to it with number one. Out of the gate, it was the Buck Sprint Pro in the Sprint series. They released this either late 2018 or early 2019, and I got my hands on it in the first couple weeks of 2019, and I was unimpressed. I was excited to get my hands on it originally because of the different blade options. They had a budget-friendly 420, but then a premium S30V version. They had burlap micarta for the premium. They had polymers for the lower end versions. Lots of color combinations. Looked like a good everyday carry blade. But the pocket clip right out of the gate was a big downfall to it. It's only right-handed setup, and it had a weird tint and kick out to it to really cause a hot spot when you gripped it. The liner lock was extremely thin and just did not have good lockup and overall deployment for the blade. They were trying to use some new features with the ball bearing system and different things like that. So the contents of the blade were good, but the execution was really a downfall and was something that I really couldn't recommend to you, the viewers, and I was kind of upset with because it had so much potential, but just couldn't be executed well with the Sprint design. Next up was a mess kit that I was really pumped to get my hands on. It's the UCO brand mess kits. Now, they released two different versions, and I've had a lot of good success with UCO in the past, but for whatever reason, these just didn't quite work, and there was kind of they should have had a blending of the two. They have a cheaper version that is microwavable. It has a silicone ring around it, and it's supposed to be at least liquid resistant from leakage, if not almost liquid proof. And then it came with a little spork. Now, the spork was a flop. I was not impressed with it at all. And the silicone ring would not allow my version to sit properly, and so it would have leakage right away. So any type of even salad dressing, if I was putting a salad in there and trying to transport it or things like that, if it was not perfectly level, leakage is going to happen inside the contents of your kit. And so the way it's designed that it should be able to handle that stuff was kind of a low point for me. And then on the flip side, they released a more expensive version that was a composite bamboo, you know, like 90% recyclable or something like that material. And then it had a really cool multi-use spork that could be transformed either into a standalone spoon, knife, fork, or converted into an, I believe it was an 8-inch or 7-inch eating utensil for those deeper dehydrated bags that meals that you eat a lot out of bags when you're backpacking and hiking. So I really connected with that spork, but I had the same leakage problems with that more expensive design, and it's not microwavable safe. So they should have just cut the more expensive one, in my opinion, given us that transforming spork, put that on the cheaper version, and then figured out how to have it sit better so that it would be less likely to leak. I mean, my Tupperware $2 items can definitely keep almost all leakage from happening. So I know there would have been easily a way that they could have worked that out. For whatever reason, they didn't, and both designs were kind of like half functional, and neither one was a win. Next up is the K-Bar TDI Flipper. Now, the TDI line is something that K-Bar has had for a while. They have these little fixed blades, you know, mostly designed for law enforcement and military for self-defense roles. So they decided to come out in that same line with a pocket flipper. So it's a pocket knife, you know, with a flipper on it. And I was pretty pumped. It was AUS-8 steel, decent price point, frame lock, G10 on one side. But the execution, again, was a failure in the sense that the in the sense that the frame lock over traveled way too far and jammed, and I was hearing that was happening with multiple designs. So it over travels on the locking mechanism. It had Teflon bushings, and for the price it should have easily had bronze bushings on it. So those two things alone made it something that I could not recommend to you because of the failure to lock properly and jam to the side, and you had to literally get like your keys in there and pop the lock out. And then obviously the other aspects to it, the locking mechanism was flush with the handle, so it was kind of tricky to get your finger in there even when it didn't over travel. So it just was something that was a flop to me, even though it had the potential with pricing and designing and the name of the TDI line behind it to possibly be a win. Next up was a pair of shoes from a really well-known brand that should have been a great hybrid, lightweight boot for the outdoors and hiking and trekking, but it just fell flat for me, and that was the Salomon Outline. Now, I purchased this and it wasn't a pretty penny. I paid $150 for this shoe. Salomon, well known, lots of people brag about the company, and I've had good experience with other designs from them. But the issue with this was the fact that it was a very narrow shoe. So even for my average size foot, and I don't get wides on any pair of shoes I've ever owned, this was a tight fit and somewhat uncomfortable for me. And then the medium traction, it just didn't have quite the traction I was hoping for. The durability, I was actually chunking out some of the traction because it wasn't a Vibram sole. And then the lack of cushion in the shoe, even though it was a mid-top to kind of give you the ankle support you would want, just did not give it the comfortability for any sort of either heavy loads or long treks. It was really designed for something basically like a high-top running shoe for the outdoors. That's really what its capability was, and it had potential with just a little extra support and a little bit of tweaking and possibly a slightly wider footprint to really be an awesome kind of lightweight day hiker, but it just fell flat for me. Next up, we had the Gerber Versafix and Versafix Pro fixed blades. These were supposed to be budget-friendly, ultralight kind of compact machetes, and neither design connected with me. I went with the more expensive Pro series that was supposed to be even better balanced and have a couple little features and a better sheath than the Versafix, but for the price, you can get really good blades out there, regardless if it's the Kershaw Camp 10 or the Ontario SP8 or even the Ontario SP10, for within about $5, have a much better steel because this comes with a very low-end Chinese stainless steel that does not hold a very good edge. The grinding and edge geometry was terrible. It was just an awkward feeling blade. I couldn't really carve and do finer work with it, and when it came to any sort of splitting or batoning, the angles were, I was ricocheting off the front. It just did not connect with me, and only really light-duty hacking was it good for. There was really nothing else that it could do well for me. It was just a big flop. It had big potential, but there's so many other competitive options that way outperform it for right around the same price point that it just doesn't make sense. Next up was the Boker, I hope I pronounced this right, Kansei. I went through 2 or 3 of these versions, all that I purchased, and none of them worked properly. The idea behind the blade was really cool. It's a very slim, sleek, gentleman folder, but the pocket clips did not seat properly and would wobble side to side. Even with Loctite, there was not a good seat for them. The deployment, though buttery smooth, was super wobbly, and the liner lock did not really perform the way it should to center it and get it really nice and solid on the lockup. And then the centering was terrible as well. It was riding either too far to the left, too far to the right, and I could not center the blade. I went and got another one. I had similar issues with that one, and so it was just a flop for me, even though it had the potential to really be this really cool, sleek, slim, either flipper or thumb flipper, dual deploying basically pocket knife. It just fell flat because of poor execution. As you're seeing throughout this video, the designs usually are not the issue. It's how the technology is applied, and then the execution of the design is usually what causes it to flop. Now, sadly, this pack should have been a win for me, but man, did it just fall flat. the Mayhem 45 from Mountainsmith and their redesign for 2019. Now, I've had the old versions of the Mayhems, and man, have they been amazing. I love them. My brother and I have rocked the Mayhem 35 older version for a couple years. I have larger Mountainsmiths in their Apex line that I love, but this new design really fell flat, and where they were trying to cut down on all sorts of different weight and structure made it so that it did not carry good loads for me. I loaded this up with about 10 pounds less than the maximum rating for it, did a couple treks, about 6 to 8 miles, and it was biting into my shoulders, it was loosening up and slapping my back, so I was constantly having to re-cinch it down, and it was not hugging to my back like it should. And when I compared it to other models from new releases, including like the KELTY Zip line, which is very similar in price and capacity and not much heavier, the Zip way outperformed it in comfortability and support on my body. So the newest design of the Mayhem 45 was a big flop for me, and particularly for the price and designing that they went into, it just didn't hit home when I was hoping it would. This next item had some good functionality, but was just way overpriced. And when it makes the worst list, it can be for functionality and, you know, lack of execution, but it can also be just because the value doesn't seem to be there. You can't wrap your head around why the cost is so high versus what else is available, because otherwise you're always going to go with what is more cost effective that can perform the same. And that's the Condor campsite hatchet. This thing, or axe, this thing has good versatility in the sense that it is a full-tanged compact hatchet. It's very compact, it's pretty lightweight, it has a nice polymer gripped handle, lanyard hole on it, the tang goes all the way through, 1075 steel, made in El Salvador, it's got a Kydex sheath, it's got good edge geometry. For a little compact, you know, hiking, backpacking, around camp hatchet, it's very durable and would last you a lifetime. The issue is that at about $80, it is in the realm of very premium overseas wood handle, like hickory, you know, European headed axes or hatchets. And compared to the S-Wing series, particularly the Sportsman 14 or 12 inch hatchets that run about $35, it's more than double the price, and they perform about the same. There's no real difference between the two, and from what I've discovered, the S-Wings can hold their own, if not even surpass, particularly if you go with the 14 inch version, that Condor, and it just doesn't make sense. If they had brought that price way lower, down to like $50 or $60 even, it would have made a lot more sense. But at $80, I can't wrap my head around it, and I don't understand that price to performance compared to what else is out there on the market. This next item makes the worst list because it's deceiving in what it makes you think that you're going to do, and it actually can't accomplish the goal. This is the Sea to Summit X Pot. Now, I've used a lot of Sea to Summit products. They're very high quality, they're usually very lightweight, and they really help cut down on weight and size in your packs when you're hiking or backpacking or camping. So those are all pluses. And this thing is designed with a hard bottom that you can put on an element to boil water or cook in, and then silicone sides and then a lid. So it's kind of like a little tea kettle that collapses down flat. So in concept, you're like, man, this is great. I can boil my water and it takes up almost no space. The issue mainly is that you then have to get some sort of extra design for your cups. So you either have to get collapsible cups, which really jacks up the price, and even then, they may not take up that much space, but then you still have to get some sort of fuel pod and element, because this design cannot be cooked over an open flame whatsoever. You cannot put it near an open flame because of the silicone walls will melt and be damaged. So you have to have the element directly below the pot for it to work. And so what that means is, even though in concept it should take up less space, because you still have to have an element and you still have to have a fuel pod, it just doesn't have the sidewalls to help contain it. In fact, those things just start flying around inside your pack or your gear. Whereas a rigid, either aluminum, stainless steel, or titanium pot or mug or cup, you can then nestle your fuel pod in, then nestle your elements in and your cups, and then it's the same amount of actual space being used, just even having a higher capability of being around open flames, and you're not worried about melting the sides of the silicone container. So for me, it claims to be able to cut down on your overall footprint in your pack, but for you to actually use it, it doesn't really do that. So it's a flop to me and makes the worst list for the gear I've tested and reviewed this year, even though once you did open it up, you put it on the element, it does boil water just fine. There's too many variables and doesn't really eliminate any of your footprint in your pack to justify all the hoops you have to jump through and the extra price that you're gonna have to pay for the X-Pot. Next up, Spyderco Endela. This is a blending of the well-loved, decade-old, or even decades old at this point, Spyderco Endura and Spyderco Delica. The Delica being the smaller, the Endura being the larger. They basically jammed the two together and gave you a medium version of the Endela. Well, that's fine, but the ergos were just a little weird to me. They didn't quite connect. The either Endura or Delica seemed to fit better in my hand. And if you want something that's in the middle, there already exists the Spyderco Stretch Tube, which is a great blade and actually has a designated choil for about the same amount of real estate that the Guard and Ricasso has on the Endura. So it actually gives you more functionality. It's about the same price. It's slightly thicker in the overall footprint, so it'll take up just slightly more space in your pocket, but it's actually, in my opinion, a more functional design than the Endura. So it was supposed to be this kind of perfect blending of the two, and I know many of you do love the Endura, and that's fine, but for me, it doesn't make any sense, and if I want that design, the Stretch beats it out every single time. Now, last but not least, this takes the cake. The Leatherman T2 and T4 series take the cake when it comes to the worst tools that I've tested and reviewed in gear this year. These things are metal bricks. The ergonomics are next to nothing on these. Literally, like the T800 from Terminator would feel more at home using this multi-tool than any human being would gripping this item. The price is very high compared to what else is out on the market of similar design. Leatherman was trying to compete with Swiss Army knives in this design, not having pliers, their one-handed opening. The technology is a good idea and functions well, but how blocky, squared off, how with the cheaper $40 version you have to pay to get a pocket clip on it. So now you're looking at $50 compared to the exact same tool layout on a Swiss Army Tinkerer is like $22. It's more than double the price, and you're getting very similar functionality. Yes, the Swiss Army won't have a locking mechanism, but the Swiss Army is going to be way more ergonomic and have a better price differentiation compared to the Leatherman. And I mean, it's like a DeLorean, guys. I mean, the Back to the Future DeLorean has about the same level of like angle ergonomics as the T2 and T4 series, and just does not make sense. It was the worst piece of gear compared to value, to performance, to execution that I saw this year. So there you have it, guys. I hope this video has just been fun, entertaining, maybe steered you away from some gear that you should probably go in a different direction with. That's part of what I always want to do here at the channel, is not only show you what I like and what's good, but also help you pump the brakes when there's stuff out there that, you might be happier with something else. There's something else that might be a little bit better out there. So thank you, guys. If you're looking, particularly in this holiday season, for your purchasing, I appreciate when you purchase through all the hyperlinks that we offer to you guys. I'll have some lists of some good products, some good backpacks, knives, multi-tools, things like that here as well in those links below. So I appreciate when you purchase through those. And again, I invite you to subscribe, become part of the GT family. Check us out on Instagram and all the social media. And would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Did you see a piece of gear that was just the worst this year that maybe I can test out and see if it performs the same and falls short for me, or maybe I find a hidden gem in the rough? So love you guys. Stay equipped, stay prepared. See you out there.